When we hear about wild tribes, the image that often comes to mind is of half-naked people, languishing from the heat and swarms of insects. But what if I tell you that there are peoples who live in the extreme north, among glaciers and perpetual frost, where survival is not just about feeding oneself, but also enduring temperatures as low as 94 degrees Fahrenheit? I will tell you about tribes living in inhuman conditions, and in the end, you will learn about the most ruthless of them, which fought with Russia for over 200 years and effectively forced it to relinquish Alaska.
Let's go!
I would like to start with the Yaghan. Tierra del Fuego is a mysterious archipelago surrounded by the cold waters of the Antarctic region. Rocky shores, steep cliffs, and sparse, pungent vegetation enveloped by icy winds, while icebergs float around throughout the year. Despite these natural hardships, the harsh archipelago was home for a long time to a people who disappeared by the beginning of the 21st century, the Yaghan Indians. Europeans encountered this tribe only in the 18th century, thanks to the German naturalist Georg Forster, a member of James Cook's expedition. Describing these people, Forster mentioned that, despite the Arctic conditions, they walked naked or covered themselves with small skins, calmly slept on rocks, and built their simple shelters from branches and skins. Every night, fires burned next to their dwellings, visible to passing ships. However, for a long time, the Yaghan remained out of the sight of researchers. The Russian navigator Otto Kotzebue speculated that they might have previously lived at more southern latitudes, but were forced to move to the northern outskirts of the land due to conflicts with other peoples. Today, scientists around the world note the peculiarities of their physique and their remarkable adaptation to the cold. But what's unusual about them? Although the Yaghan physically resemble the Indians of the Amazon, there are significant physical differences. They have a much more substantial layer of subcutaneous fat, a distinctive feature that helped them adapt to the merciless cold. Scientists believe that thicker individuals of this people were more survivable, while leaner people were prone to quick death. Thus, genetic selection favored the formation of a certain body type. There was no place for the slender here. However, this is only part of the survival equation. Anthropologist Stanislav Drobiszewski suggests that, in addition to a propensity for plumpness, the Yaghan could inherit metabolic characteristics. Their blood vessels had a special structure. They were located deeper in the body than in ordinary people. This allowed better heat retention and warmed the internal organs necessary for survival. Such genetic changes helped these folks adapt to icy conditions. Speaking of northern peoples, Eskimos immediately come to mind. They are the indigenous population living in the extreme northern regions. They inhabit Greenland, Canada, Alaska, and the Chukotka Peninsula. Scientists classify this nation as belonging to the Mongoloid group of the Arctic type. Their name Eskimo comes from the Indian term Eskimonsik, which translates to a person who eats raw fish, coined by the Aboriginal Americans and still used today. In Chukotka, the Far Eastern Islands, and various regions of Alaska, the native peoples identify themselves as Yupik, meaning the real person. The total population of this northern people, living on different continents, is about 170,000 people. The majority live in Greenland and Alaska. In Russia, there are only about 1,500 people. Eskimos form communities uniting residents of one settlement or winter camp. They consist of many families, each of which performs certain duties. A family may include not only a husband, wife, and their children, but also other close relatives. Often several families live in one dwelling. Family couples sleep together with their children in the center of the house, while single members of the community occupy places on the edge of the room. Most Eskimo marriages are monogamous, with each man having only one wife. However, sometimes a man can have two wives. Divorces also occur but are rare, as the lifestyle of the people is directed towards maintaining the well-being of the family and community as a whole. The lifestyle of the Eskimos is shaped by close interrelationships, requiring a high degree of mutual assistance and consciousness from each community member. They conduct communal hunts, use shared resources, and abide by common norms and rules. Informal rules of coexistence are expressed in the following principles. Within a settlement, no one has the right to build a house without the consent of all its residents. This is democracy in action. Each community member is entitled to a certain share of the catch, with more successful hunters providing meat and fish to their relatives. This helps to avoid hunger in the community. Anyone has the right to live and hunt outside the community if they wish. If someone finds ownerless items, they have the right to claim them. When hunters are unsuccessful, wealthy families invite others to dine in a gesture of support. The Eskimos lack formal management organizations. They don't need them. All issues are discussed within the community and resolved on the spot. Quarrels and scandals are forbidden, as it is important to maintain peaceful coexistence in a limited territory. Their languages do not contain swear words. Crime is virtually non-existent in their society. In the rare case of murder, retaliatory blood vengeance is required. The relatives of the deceased must find and kill the guilty party. These rules and norms ensure peaceful and solidary coexistence in their small communities, and as a result, crime is a rare occurrence among them. In traditional Eskimo families, girls typically hold a subordinate position. Before marrying, the consent of both parents is required, as well as that of brothers if they are present in the family. If the parents do not allow their daughter to marry, she may remain living with them. It's noteworthy that, according to customs, a man can capture a girl to become his wife by force, but only with the consent of her parents, not the girl herself. Eskimo marriages are accompanied by minimal ceremonies. The girl simply moves to a new home, taking with her belongings, clothes, sewing supplies, and her own knife. The status of a wife in the family is characterized by her submission to her husband and mother-in-law, where she does not have the right to her own opinion. It's hard to agree with the fact that a man has the right to punish his wife for any violations. However, children in the family are never subjected to punishment. If the husband decides to take another wife, the first one remains the primary wife. Usually the second girl is taken for the continuation of the lineage if the first wife cannot have children for any reason. But let's discuss another tribe. The Dolgans are a small ethnic group living in Tamir, numbering only about 8,000, though the actual number may be even smaller. The life and culture of the Dolgans depend on the constantly changing world around them. Confronted with globalization and civilization, the traditional lifestyle of these reindeer herders and hunters has undergone changes. Nevertheless, in recent years, the Dolgans have shown a greater interest in their culture. Among them, important rituals are preserved, such as feeding the fire and offerings to the spirits of the locality. One such ritual is the meeting of the new sun, which serves as a symbol of union, and the youth ritual dance of Hero. The Dolgans regard natural phenomena with amazing reverence, considering them as living beings. For example, they believe that the sun goes to the underworld during the polar night, where demons cleanse it from negativity. They have a somewhat strange attitude towards ancestor worship. Dolgans should not visit the cemetery within 3 years after the death of a loved one.
No! God, please, no! No!
So as not to disturb them in the other world. Memories are preserved through names, with children being named in honor of the deceased. In the past, the life of reindeer herders was extremely difficult. Many men died in hunting, and women remained at the head of the family. In modern times, elders are still respected, although sometimes disagreements arise. Arctic living conditions necessitate caring for others, with the idea of help and support being more important than nationality and appearance. In such places, it's impossible to survive alone. The main dangers are foolishness, laziness, and irresponsibility, which can cost a person their life. The Athabascans are an ethnic group living in the northern regions of America, whose housing features and lifestyle are closely connected with the surrounding nature. They live in the Arctic zone, after all. They use semi-subterranean dwellings, often covered with skin or sod, depending on the location. Skin plays a key role in creating clothing and footwear, which are decorated with feathers and amulets, and a leather cape helps identify tribal or group affiliation. Rituals are an important aspect of their culture. Funerals are organized with respect for the deceased's soul, which, according to beliefs, is purified from earthly sins through fire. Newborns also receive a secret name, corresponding to their spirit guardian. The religious beliefs of the Athabascans are connected with the idea of a predominant element in each person and sacred animals, whose images are used as talismans. In Athabascan mythology, the raven symbolizes wisdom, while the coyote is associated with cunning. They believe that images of these animals on the body help in achieving success, protecting against evil spirits. This mysterious people prefer to maintain their isolation from outsiders, viewing newcomers with caution due to fears of the harm they might bring. Many of their brethren have died from diseases brought by strangers. Like most wild tribes, they have virtually no immunity. In Canada, there are about 64,000 Inuit, also known as Canadian Eskimos, most of whom live in the Inuit region of Nunavut. The average age of modern Inuits is only 24 years. They are credited with inventing sunglasses made from animal bones and horns worn by local hunters. Snowshoes and summer kayaks are also considered local creations, though they are used worldwide. At Cape Dorset, in the Northern Territory of Nunavut, the Inuits even engage in art such as soapstone carving and creating textiles from natural materials. They are also known for their throat singing and creating inukshuks, stone figures that are a symbol of their people. The Inuits have their own language, Inuktitut, which has 5 main dialects and is used in the northern regions of Canada. 2 writing formats are used, Roman orthography and a syllabic system. Dog sleds are a popular mode of transport for the Inuits, and their Kimik breed is under threat of extinction. They are known as excellent hunters, hunting wolves, polar bears, seals, walruses, caribou, and whales. The traditional Inuit cuisine includes dried caribou meat, raw seal brain, kelp, and caribou liver. These dishes are part of their cultural heritage. The Sami are a small Finno-Ugric people living in Northern Europe. Most of them reside in Norway, Finland, and Sweden. They were called Lapps by Scandinavians and Lopars by Russians, which laid the foundation for the name Lapland as the land of this people. The origin of the Sami is a mystery to researchers. The ethnonym Lapps presumably comes from the word Lapp, which the Vikings used to describe themselves. This term became common in the Swedish language and was used to refer to the peoples inhabiting Lapland. So, Santa Claus is also a Sami. The connection between the Sami and other peoples led to the assumption that they could have been called Finns. In ancient times, the classical historian Pytheas mentioned the Finni peoples, who lived in the lands of Lapland and engaged in fishing, hunting, and gathering. Over time, Slavic and Finno-Ugric tribes began to displace the Sami, and they moved to the far northern lands. Taxes and tributes were imposed on their territories, leading to disagreements and doubly taxation of the people. One of the problems for the Sami was alcoholism.
What?
Traders intentionally made them drunk for profitable trade. Later, the Sami were even forcibly removed from their land. In the northern regions of Lapland, the Sami had to contend with harsh climate conditions and alcoholism, while in the southern areas, they faced assimilation by state authorities. In Sweden and Norway, there was an active policy of assimilation aimed at turning the Sami into typical representatives of their countries. As a result of this policy, the Sami language was threatened, and school reforms in Sweden involved complete Swedishization among the Sami population. In Norway, only a person with a Norwegian name, surname, and knowledge of the language could claim a plot of land. Finland implemented a policy of Finnization, which was less aggressive than the assimilation methods used in other countries. Nevertheless, the influence of national policy had a negative impact on the culture and language of the Sami in all 3 countries. Modern Sami actively strive to preserve and pass on their culture to future generations. They express growing national consciousness and make efforts to preserve their identity, traditions, and beliefs. But you understand, once tasting modern amenities, it's hard not to succumb to them. Now let's talk about the most warlike tribe, the Tlingit. Their resistance in Alaska became a real problem for the vast empire and only ended in the early 21st century. The war between the Tlingit and Russia lasted almost 202 years. Before the arrival of Europeans and Russians, they completely dominated these lands. This warlike people living on the shores and islands were extremely aggressive and war-oriented. The self-named Tlingit translates as man. The Russians gave them various nicknames related to the peculiarities of their customs. One such nickname was Kaluji, caused by their strange custom of inserting decorations into the lower lip, which hindered them from speaking and eating normally. The Tlingit had unique physical training and adaptation to the harsh conditions of Alaska. They were raised from early childhood, becoming accustomed to the cold of the seas and rivers, making them practically immune to the cold. Initially, the Tlingit did not perceive the newcomers as enemies, and even traded with them. However, gradually, Discord arose due to mistakes by the Russian administration and economic pressure on the Tlingit from the Russians. The war continued from 1802 to 1805, after which it entered a cold phase. The Tlingit no longer attacked with mass forces, but carried out attacks on small squads and hunting groups, disrupting the balance the Russians tried to create. This conflict proved overly costly for Russia, and eventually, to reduce losses, Alaska was sold to the USA in 1867. Currently, almost all ethnic groups of the far north are on the brink of survival. Unfortunately, today's society is not conducive to preserving ancient rites and traditions. Thank you for watching.